Hey guys, today I'm going to make a little different video than usual here. What you're looking at now is another one of Dave Luce's Polymoogs, and this is a pre-restoration view of it. And today I'm just going to make a video of the actual teardown. I figured some of you guys might like to see what happens in a teardown situation and how I go about, tearing it down, because these things are massive. Anyways, I'm going to just give you an overview here of what this one looks like before the teardown. You can see it's really nasty. It's been sitting for a very long time. And I've already done a little bit of prep work to this one just to get it to work where I could diagnose some of the problems to see what it was actually doing, because it wouldn't power up before. And the reason is evidently Dave Luce stole the power supply and stuff out of this one. And actually had stole the power switch, the power jack, everything. So you can see I actually had a donor Polymoog I took all this out of, and I re-riveted everything in place there. And so it's actually got the factory style switch and everything back in it. But just overview here, and we're going to start the teardown. But you can see just kind of how dirty it is, and it's definitely unhealthy. It needs some work. But this is a later Polymoog, and this actually brings up a new topic that I've never had this late of Polymoog in here. And it's actual serial number 3000. Let's see, what is it? I knew it off my head. It's 3990. So this is a very late Polymoog, probably around 1978. And as some of you recall, when the 288 came out, which is the keyboard model, setting over there, which says Polymoog keyboard on it, and you lost all the extra features here. Well, they rebadged this thing as the Polymoog synthesizer, and you can see that this one actually says Polymoog synthesizer. Now, it's no different than the early Polymoog, which if we walk over here to this one, you can see that this one actually says Polymoog keyboard on it. And that's the giveaway that this one was made after the 288, because they rebadged that from Polymoog keyboard to Polymoog synthesizer. Exact same unit. They didn't really change anything internally except for just that graphic on the front. And this is another one of Dave Luce's Polymoogs as well. And actually, I have the privilege of owning this one. I did some work for the last Polymoog and some trading, and I actually own this Polymoog, which was Dave's. Very special to me. It'll be getting a restoration here at some point, but since it's my personal unit, it's on the back burner till I can get some time. But yeah, anyways guys, that's actual serial number 54, so it's really early. But back to this one, as you can see, it says the Polymoog synthesizer. But anyways, just wanted to point that out. And now we're going to start the teardown. So I've already got the case loose. I've got everything loose here. So let me actually plug my camera in so it don't die on me. And we'll get you on the tripod here, and we'll start the teardown process. Oops, I need to do that. So let me do this right here, flip this around. I know it's probably annoying, guys. There we go. Make sure everything's still lined up. Okay, so we're going to be listening to Celery Field's Movement album while we tear this thing down. It's just some good music to listen to while I work on synthesizers. A lot of times I'll put on different artists and tear down instruments. So we're going to start first with this one. To remove the cover. It's already loose. Just pull the cover off. And I've already got the bags and everything lined up, so we can actually work on this thing real fast and efficient. Now, something I like to do is I actually like to plug it back in with power, and actually go in here and unplug the power supply from the transformer, so I don't accidentally give it juice or anything. Alright, so we'll start here. So I got the bags lined up, I got my tools lined up. The reason I plug it back in though, guys, is because I use an ESD strap. I hook it to the ground of the chassis. Keeps me from zapping the boards from static, because these things are static sensitive, especially when you start handling this stuff raw without connections. It's worse. So let me get strapped up here. Really handy tool as well, guys. If you are working on electronics, I recommend you just go buy an ESD strap. They're about $10, but they're worth every penny when you get into some of these circuits. So you just strap it like that. We'll start by unplugging the top boards. And actually, I think I've got it rolled up right there, okay? Start by unplugging all the connections. And this Polymoog, by the way, is very sick. It's got some problems, and in the restoration process, I already know what some of the symptoms are based off what I've seen in the past. It's got the common failure trends, as I always talk about in every video. So we're going to strip it down here. And a lot of these will be fixed just in the restoration, a lot of these problems. You got op amps that die, you got things like that. Let me get my bag here from the top boards. And what I do is I label bags for the screws and stuff, so I can just keep up with it. I got a box over here, a banker's box. I put all the boards in, so as well as ESD bags, so I can secure everything real safely. Whoops, that one just fell down in there. That's okay. If you drop a screw in there, it's okay. In this case. Thing is with the Polymoog is if you drop a screw, it goes all the way to the bottom. So the only way to get the screws out in that case is actually to turn it up on its side and shake it, which is very hard to do. It's 63 pounds roughly. So it takes some work. Loosen the hinges. Now be careful down here. If you ever remove these boards, you actually got hinges on the ends, so you can tilt the boards up. For a for mod card or poly card, or whatever you want to call them, so you can maintenance reseat them. As you can see, I got one hinge in. We'll just kind of support the side, and the board will raise up. But for those that don't know, I've talked about Dave Luce a lot in the past here, but I know I'm probably just mentioning his name without a backstory. Dave Luce was the one that actually designed the Polymoog. And he worked at Moog Music through the Norland years and had a lot of play in Moog. He actually designed the Taurus pedals, the famous Moog Taurus 1 pedals, and some of the other stuff from Moog Music, along with some of the other engineers as well. You had Rich Walborn, you had Tony Marchesi, you had a bunch of these guys that were. Jim Scott was another big one. Rich Walborn and Jim Scott. But Dave Luce also played a very important role at Moog Music. And of course the Polymoog, he really was the first one to introduce a polyphonic synthesizer. Also, a lot of people don't know this, but the Opus 3 was also a design by Dave. And then Herb Deutsch designed the interface for that actual instrument. So you had Herb Deutsch designing the layout, and Dave Luce designing the circuits to make it work. And the Opus 3 is like a little string ensemble. It's actually a really cool little string ensemble. I have one, but I don't have it here at the shop where I'd show it to you. So there's a lot of good history, in these synthesizers. The only thing is about ESD strap, guys, is it sometimes gets in the way. But, once again, it's worth having. Now I'm just pulling all these screws out. And for the center board, you actually sometimes have to remove this card, the filter card for the harpsichord. You actually just kind of unplugs. You can kind of see it there. That's one of the harpsichord fixed filters. And there's a screw here that we have to remove. Here's what I do. I keep that screw out and I'll just put it back in place. Back in there. All the wiring's unplugged. We got 2 more screws for the hinge. these over here for now. I'll actually move this out of the way so you kind of get a better idea. Set up the box. Let me get my other tool here. And after doing these for so long, you kind of get this whole habit of routine of the tools you'll need, and you know, just kind of get in that category. I've restored so many of these things now, it's almost second nature. But I never get tired of it. They're always a lot of fun. Always very challenging too, which is always good, because every Polymoog's a little different, you know, in its failure modes. And you have the common stuff, and then you have the uncommon stuff. This one here, I'm just going to lift this board. I'm just going to get these washers off there. And then there's our fixed filter board out. Same thing here, we'll put it in the ESD bag. And once again, I'm kind of rough with these boards because I'm not worried about calibration or any of that kind of stuff. If I was worried about calibration, I wouldn't be quite as rough with these boards. But since it's going to be getting a recalibration anyways after the restore, I'm not real concerned about calibration points. So same thing here, we'll go back here, remove this. This is your fixed filter board. I'm sorry, your VCF board. Has a mono keyboard circuit as well on it. So this is actually what, if you plug in a Minimoog or whatever, you can actually control it. And you've probably seen my videos where I control a Behringer Model D with the Polymoog, and that's this board here handling the CV for that. So get all the wiring unplugged. Okay. I know this table's a little shaky. It's just an old, it's a crap table I use for restorations because I don't really care if it gets scratched up. And when you work on memory moogs, they scratch the table up. So you get that large heatsink on the back, completely ruins a table if you're not careful. I used to get yelled at by my parents. Sometimes I'd bring one in, and I was always real careful with memory moogs because I just knew from looking at it that it was not a very forgiving instrument on the table. But there'd be times, you know, that I'd have like, you know, 2 or 3 Polymoogs sitting on the dining room table at a time. And, you know, my parents I have great parents, don't get me wrong. But, you know, I know that got on their bedside from time to time. Trying to walk in and see all these Polymoogs on the table. So when I got this shop, it made things a lot better. And that screw that I dropped, it went all the way down to the bottom. So there's not much I can do there until I get to the lower motherboards. And that's right. And then sometimes on these later Polymoogs, I almost forgot about it. They actually got a shield underneath here. And you can see there's a screw right here that's actually got a little washer on it, and it won't come out. And if you keep twisting it, it'll eventually come out and you'll lose that washer, and you'll have all kind of problems with trying to keep things in place. Same thing here, we're going to get this board here around. I don't know if this is enough bag or not. Let's see if we got enough here. Probably not. I'll just stick it inside there for now. Fold it up like that. And here's the shield I'm talking about right here. This is just a little metal plate, and it's got a ground reference right there on the corner. And that actually, if you have an early Polymoog and you have all these droning problems and you can really hear the top octave bleed through, that's what this card here prevents. So more than likely, if you got a really noisy Polymoog, this card here is not grounded, or you're missing this card. So that's something to think about. So now we're at the lower motherboards. We can actually seal screws up for our top board, and I'll throw them here in a box. And then we'll start removing our lower motherboards. Now the power supply is actually not mounted here, so I don't even have mounting screws for it. It just sets in there. But one warning, guys, if you ever work on these things, there's grease on these heat sinks of the power supply. It's thermal compound is what that's called. And it kind of works like antifreeze in a car. It helps carry the heat. In this case, it's carrying the heat across from this piece of metal here to the actual back chassis metal. It helps it flow, the heat flow through to the metals. And if you get this on carpet or anything, it absolutely ruins the carpet. The first time I restored one of these, I got this stuff all over my bedroom carpet. That was the worst thing I'd ever done. So what I do is I got this little piece of bubble wrap I use for just setting these on there. And then I just set it like that right there, and I'll set this over here out of the way. And now that's out of the way. So we got the power supply out of the way. Now we're actually going to work on the divider board, unplugging our motherboards here. So we got the harness. We'll unplug the harness. We're actually just going to unplug it all for all voices here. All lower motherboards. And these guys, these are the poly cards, or mod cards as they're called. You got one of these for each note, and that's what they look like. And this has actually got what you call the Polycom chip on it, which is actually what Dave and the engineers worked on designing at Moog Music back in the day. This chip right here is what makes the Polymoog really possible, because that chip holds a VCA, a VCF. The VCF in this case is used just for your brightness control, but then it's also got a VCA built in and an extra response to EG, envelope generator. So these cards are doing a whole lot, as well as wave shaping. There's a lot of misinformation out there about the Polymoog and how they actually work. It uses divider circuits, but that's about the only thing similar to an organ. So it uses the divider chips just to drive a frequency, and then the cards here actually all do their own wave shaping, and then their own their own control in that. The only thing that the dividers get is frequency modulation, and that's about it. So you can frequency modulate the dividers, and then it goes into wave shape. But these cards also handle pulse width modulation. So you got pulse width control as well as pulse width modulation control in these mod cards. So it's just pretty complex. For 1976 when these were designed, it was really an interesting stuff. And what's nice about these later Polymoogs is that everything is screen printed, meaning that you actually have writing on all the boards to label the component locations and stuff. And it can make troubleshooting and repair a lot easier than some of the earlier ones. There's also different revisions of circuit boards too. Actually, that one didn't come out right. And let me go and get my bag here, and we'll start doing this. That's going to be, let's see. Let me use. I actually already labeled my bags here. So that's the left lower motherboard. These are your standoffs here. That right there. Now the hinges, I do something a little different, because if you bend these hinges, you'll break them. So I got some little small channel locks. I just go in here and I just kind of give them a little nudge there, and then I can turn them. If they get tight, just be real careful. I have to hit it again here with the. Sometimes you have to twist them back and forth just a little bit. It's like anything, when you get a little corrosion or they haven't been turned in a long time, if they got Loctite in them, you have to just kind of work them. There we go. You can see the little hinge I'm talking about here. It's a little hinge standoff. It's threaded on one end, the other end's open to accept the screw for the upper boards. That's how that works. loosen this one here. Same thing on this one, it's a hinge. So let's get all the screws out of that one. So now what we're going to do, we're going to actually go here and we're going to unplug the keyboard. And like I said before, guys, I actually got to meet the Luce family, which was just a very, very inspiring trip for me. Working on these Polymoogs like I do and getting to meet Dave Luce's family was just fantastic. And then getting to work on his Polymoogs is even fantastic in itself. I won't say it's more fantastic because it was just really cool getting to meet the family. And I don't think it would meant as much if I, kind of got to meet them. Right here, these are actually your HFO cards. We're actually going to go and get the harness out of the way here. Sometimes it's easier just to get the harness out of the way. So yeah, we got that right there. That's fine. So I'll show you right here. This is you got two of these cards here. These are your HFO cards, as they're called, high frequency oscillator cards. And these hold your top octave chip as well as a phase lock loop that responds back to the voltage controlled oscillators on the top left board to drive your dividers. So they are actually voltage controlled oscillator driven, and basically these cards have a divider on them or a NAND gate that responds to your footage rank that actually will offset the frequency going into your actual top octave chip. So you can actually, that's what does your footage controls of your oscillators. So kind of interesting stuff. A lot of stuff going on in these things, guys. It's more than just simple oscillator and, I'm just going to plug them back in here temporarily. I just want to show you that so you kind of get an idea. And then what I'm doing now is I'm just unplugging the harness here so we can pull this board out. So what I'm going to do is we'll pull all this harness back this way. And there's one of the motherboards. That's your lower motherboard there. You can see how complex they are. But got that out of the way. So we're actually going to stick this right into the box here. Keep our screws out of the way. Alright, actually we should be able to access that screw we dropped earlier. Should be in here somewhere. Maybe, I see it. It's underneath the interface here. There we go. Got the screw we dropped earlier. I think it had a washer on it. There's the washer back there. There we go. So we got the washer and the screw out of there. I'll put that in a little bag here. Sometimes it's good to remove things while it's on your mind. Because when you work on something this large, it's going to be apart for a while. It's easy to forget parts. Or forget that you dropped something and you get to that point and it's like, oh man, what happened? So these standoffs here are going to be a little different. Because the standoff comes off, but the thread stays in. So we'll have to work on that. Actually, since we got that out of the way, we'll lay the harness back around here. Like that. Another mistake a lot of people make is they over torque these things when they work on them. You can actually crack the bottom chassis. As you can see, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but your standoff, your actual threads are on the bottom side of the chassis. And it's a composite material, so if you over torque these when you're installing them, you can actually crack these threads and you can have problems, big problems. Go over here with my pliers and see if I can. Sometimes once you get things moving, it's not too bad. In this case, I'm going to have to do something a little different here. It's just hard. I need a deep well socket. I don't have a deep well socket on me that fits these right now, so I just have to go real slow with it. Luckily, there's no components in the way here. I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a minute. Pull this out. So here we go. Got one of them out. So you can see that this is just a little thread. It's got a thread on one end, like a almost like a sheet metal screw, but not quite. Probably just a machine screw, and then on the other end it's got a smaller thread pattern which takes the standoff. So the standoff screws onto there. What this does allows you to be able to adjust your standoffs if you have to adjust them for any kind of reason. I have had Polymoogs that had a warped chassis, and I've had to adjust these to make the boards mount correctly without stressing them. That's where that comes in handy. So get that one out. This here is going to be a little bit more fun. I think he's pretty loose, so once he's actually moving pretty well. There we go. So same thing, had one of those get stuck in there and the standoff came off without the bottom thread. Put that back on there. There's that. So now we got the same thing on this end with hinges. Just take those and get that out of there. Actually, I've already had this middle board out. For the Polymoog I restored last couple of months ago. We used it at the at Dave's Luce life celebration event. Because Dave Luce, he passed away last April, and so the whole reason was I went down there was I got a Polymoog working for Dave Luce life celebration event, and I was able to get one of his Polymoogs working for the event, which was very special. And I used this center board in the Polymoog that we used there because it had issues in a coupling capacitor that I didn't have with me, so I couldn't fix it. So I just kind of stole some parts out of this Polymoog to make that other one work. And it made it through the event, and I was very happy with that. And what you see me doing here is I'm actually unplugging the divider frequency drivers. So we'll do that, and then the front's your keyboard. So there's that board out of the way. Once again, same thing. And these boards are different, guys. Every one of these middle boards every one of the lower motherboards are different. They all work the same way, but they got different count values for your actual keyboard circuit, your actual decay, attack, all that. They give you different responses for low end, middle, and high octaves. It makes it more like a real piano or a real musical instrument, stringed instrument. So, got that out of the way. Alright, now we're on to the last motherboard here. Also, before I do that, let me bag these right quick. Same thing again, I got a bag mark for the center motherboard parts. It's not as necessary with these standoffs, I just do it out of habit. Sometimes you never know how things are going to fit back together if you use the part from another location. It's kind of lesson learned in my part. Sorry about that, guys. My camera just died here. I plugged it in, but evidently it didn't kick in here. So, anyways, as I said earlier, I bag and tag all the parts. I'll go here and loosen the last motherboard here. Here's an example of a weird one. Okay, I see what they did. Yeah, they actually stuck nuts on this one to raise it up higher because you got that shield. It can actually fit in there. There we go. Because this one had a nut on it, I was able to grasp the whole thing. I'll put their nut back on that. There we go. Show you what I'm talking about. Show you on camera here. You can see how there's more space on that one versus this one, so it gives it more height on the actual standoff with a lower thread. So that's basically what's different there. And the reason for that is because that shield goes underneath this board, so they just gave it more so the board wouldn't actually bend and flex. Wouldn't be in an odd position. They did the same to this one too. Another reason to bag and tag, because you never know what you're going to run into, just like that. If I had put this in just one giant bag, I may have not noticed that when putting it back together. I'll just leave those out. Now we'll remove the hinges down here. I'm going to move my ESD strap connection down here, this end. And same thing here, I'm removing the hinges. So like this. And there's our standoffs and hinges. So we'll take our next bag for this motherboard. Oops. Now they come apart a lot easier than they go back together, believe me. This is, pretty fast to tear one down. Putting it back together is a little bit more of some work. Because you're dealing with retorquing everything, making sure you don't get anything too tight, making sure you have the right bolts. Biggest thing is make sure you don't cross thread things. I hate that when I get something in and somebody's worked on something, they didn't start the threads before they started with a drill or something. Completely ruins the threads. And a lot of these parts are brass, so if you over tighten them any little bit, they crack and they break. It's not good. So I got that out. This board here should just lift. Now once I get clear of all the connectors here. Clear all the harness here. There we go. So there's our other motherboard there. That's our upper board. Again, I usually just spin the wire kind of around here. Put it to a box, and now that's got all of our center boards and our main boards out. So now we're going to work on getting the divider out of here. So the divider board, once again, it consists of the HFO cards, which I'm just going to lay in here for right now. Put that right there. Which those will be getting a rebuild as well. There's parts on these that fell as well. I know this one's got some sync divider chips as well, so we got some divider work to do. We're actually missing the washers and block washers for this particular board. How I'm feeling probably because Dave pulled all this out a couple of times. And there's our divider board. This is actually where your division happens. You got basically 2 oscillators, so it's a 2 oscillator synthesizer, two oscillators per note. So you got oscillator 1, oscillator 2. One generates the sawtooth, one generates the square wave. Although you'll see all squares here because it's division. It's a clock basically. So it's all square wave. But then that's where the mod card comes in and actually shapes these things and makes them work. But pretty cool stuff for this decade period. It's not quite like an organ either because these are all special chips, not really designed for an organ or anything. Moog had their own chip sets. So basically what happens is these cards here, your HFO cards, plug into the top. These little red connectors here. You can kind of see how that looks. You have one on this side here as well. And it goes like that right there. And that's how your dividers and HFO cards, high frequency oscillator cards, all look together. And so it's pretty interesting, pretty neat stuff. And then these are driven from your VCOs. So it's VCO to these cards, and from these cards to your dividers, and these dividers to your frequency wave shaping circuits on your mod card. So each key has its own wave shaping, which gives each key its own character, which is very interesting. Not too many things did this. Most things actually didn't even focus on wave shape that much. They just did a real simple wave shaping circuit, and then they ran it through a chorus. Is really what they did. That's the example of how the the ARP Omni works. So very, very complex for this time period. And for what it does, it had to be complex because it's just there's so much going on. So I got a bag here labeled divider screws. Go over here. Put this back here in the box. Let's see here. Here we go. So here's our divider screw bag. Goes in there. And actually, I'm going to take. I got a spare. Yeah, here we go. I had a spare ESD bag. Let me go over here and get an ESD bag for the. I think we just use some ESD bubble wrap. We'll take that, strap back on here. Take our ESD, sorry, not ESD, our divider board and wrap it. That we'll put our HFO cards in there as well. That right there, so we got all that secure. Put that in the box. Alright, so that's got those boards out. So now we're going to focus on the interface. And the interface will actually come with our harness. So we got our harness here, we'll put everything back in position. I'll plug this connector here. Oops, that could have been bad. And what I like about the Polymoog is I actually put a harness connector for the back plane, so when I remove this I don't have to worry about trying to desolder a harness. So get all that out of the way. So now we'll remove the interface. In the last Polymoog I serviced, it was missing all these screws right here, which was very dangerous. Not these screws I'm actually taking out, but there's a screw that holds these, I don't know if you can see it on camera, there's metal planes right here that bolt to the actual circuit boards. and keeps everything together. And it was actually missing these screws that hold these to the circuit board, which was quite a mess. And if you push too hard on this board, you could actually short things out because these things would flare. There's an area right here that's really critical to have those attached. Let me put my divider screws here. Let's see, I'm going to start an interface screw bag here. So I won't actually be tearing down the interface on this video, so I'm going to keep it all together to take it home and clean everything up. I don't know, I might take it apart for you so you can see it. Because the front boards are really the only major digital part of this thing. It's not even really all that digital, it's just really binary data. But for the time, that was very advanced stuff, you know. This is just kind of the long process of teardown. And here in a minute you'll see something I recommend everybody do that works on a Polymoog, because just so many times I see this crap scratched up on the keys, and this interface will cause that if you don't take some precautionary action. And there's fixing to be a train come by. I'm really close to the train tracks here at my shop. So if you hear a train horn, that's what you're hearing. Some days it really flies through here. So right now I'm just removing all the bracket screws. And this is also a critical area whenever I do upgrades to early Polymoogs, which of course, like serial number 54 is definitely going to need this, is you want to add a ground wire between the interface panels and the back plane. And the reason is for that is because these chassis can actually float. And it's not that big a deal until you have like a really dry day, which when your humidity goes down, your static goes up. And when it's cold weather, usually humidity drops. And it's more critical to have ESD control then as well. But when these things weren't mounted, you can see like a ground wire like right here. I don't know if my camera can see that or not. But it connects to the chassis. This chassis here connects to the rear plane, which has all your earth grounding on it. Another reason I leave this thing plugged in. And what that does is that just keeps everything, like if I was to touch this interface and I was to have static buildup, the static is like lightning, you know, so it'll zap this thing 40,000, 50,000 volts, sometimes even as high as, I think you can even get static as high as 80,000 volts. And when you zap something, it can actually pass through electronic components and kill them. So if you don't have earth ground, it's just like not having a lightning rod on a house. Lightning will hit the house directly and might fry everything in the house. So that's really the benefits of having all these earth grounds. And early Polymoogs had a really bad problem with not having proper earth grounding. And so you would, be on stage. You'd see people have rugs on stage. They'd walk across the stage to play their Polymoog and zap, and they'd kill something. So just a little bit of information there for you. So now this interface should be loose, and you can see it is. I think we've got everything loose except for the keyboard wiring here, which real careful with this part right now, because if I set this interface down wrong, I can scratch the keys. So we're going to just move this little thing. I won't go through the whole wiring harness because not all Polymoogs are exactly the same on this layout. So we got that. Next we need to remove this here. Remove this chassis screw here. We'll put this one actually back in place for right now. It's just got a wire clamp holding the harness in place. Just kind of wraps around the wire. I'll show you on camera here. Like I say, not all Polymoogs have the same wiring layout. It's got one of these little clamps here that you screw down and the wire fits through it. You have this big bolt or screw that goes through it, holds your harness in place. So we'll put that one back in place for right now, because that's a whole other chassis screw bag. So now I can actually lift this interface up, like so. So I can actually remove the whole harness now, minus this here, which we got to cut some wire ties or zip ties. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this right here. This is the critical stuff right here, is where I use this bubble route. So it's a small bubble route. And I actually lift the interface up. And I put this across the keyboard. This right here. And I can set this back down. I don't have to worry about scratching the keys up. Makes a world of difference. So we're going to go and tear down the interface. I figure why not, right? So we're actually going to leave these screws in. We want to start from the bottom. I'm going to need my smaller screwdriver right here, because there's a smaller screws down here. I'll put this thing up on its back here. With the boards out of the way, it's really easy to do all this. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do these screws here. Luckily, with all the boards out of the way too, I can use the chassis as a place to put my screws temporarily. So, and I'm not worried about them going under anything. So, and Ben, I know you're going to be watching this video, so. Once again, I really do appreciate you giving me the opportunity to work on your dad's Polymoogs here. Ben Luce is the son of Dave Luce, for those watching. It was just such a cool thing. I got to hang out with Ben Luce and Janice Luce, which is Ben's wife. Wonderful people. I mean, absolutely wonderful people. And hung out in Dave's house. I actually got to spend some time in Dave's workshop working on these Polymoogs, where he probably spent time engineering these things. So just a really cool step in time for me, you know, being the person I am that loves these instruments. And I dropped the washer. That's fine, we'll get it later. I dropped the washer down on the side here. I figured you guys might enjoy a video like this a little bit more than me just going through and saying, oh yeah, this is what I did, you know. Because this is a business, it's sometimes real easy to get caught up in the whole just showing the end results. There's a lot of work that goes in these synthesizers that I work on, and I mean, I put a lot of love in them. You know, there's no lying in that. I mean, it's I don't believe in fast jobs. I believe in jobs done right. Is what I believe in. Sometimes, you know, a job, it might take me a few months to get it right, and unfortunately, you know, I've actually got a memory mode right now on the floor that's exactly that case. I've had it for about 6 months, and you know, I've been trying to rule out what's causing the problems, but it's not going home until I'm happy with it, you know, and that's my rule. And you know, I don't mind cutting people breaks on the bill either. You know, at some points, because sometimes it's a learning experience even for myself. You know, there's times I get into something, and you know, if I didn't ever see the problem, then I would never learn the problem. I'd never have the opportunity to figure some of these problems out. So, you know, to me, sometimes it's a learning curve as well. And I don't necessarily always agree with charging for something that I did that didn't fix a problem. You know what I mean? It's the hours, the labor, you know. So I try to keep things very, very, very fair with my shop. Plus, this is all passion driven anyways. I mean, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't love it. And it's, you know, it's the history of this stuff too. You know, Bob Moog is very important. Don't get me wrong. Bob Moog is a very important person. And actually, him and Dave were friends, so there's really no hard feelings there. But you know, there's a lot of engineers that were behind Moog music that people don't really talk about. And a lot of these engineers never really get the credit they, you know, I really think they probably deserve. You know, because you got the Mini Moog, which, you know, Jim Scott worked on a lot. He worked on the Mini Moog quite a bit, designing the VCF and VCA circuits. And, you know, you never hear these people mentioned really that much. So my goal is to, you know, kind of share some history of this stuff as well with you guys, because that's important. Especially if you're an enthusiast like I am of vintage Moog synthesizers and, you know, the history of some of these electronic instruments. And I've had the privilege of meeting Tom Ray, who wrote a lot of the manuals for Moog. And well, I tell you, he's a hoot. He's a really cool guy. He's probably one of the most wittiest people I've ever met. And I mean that in a good way, Tom, if you're watching this. I really enjoyed getting to meet him at the at Dave's Life Celebration event as well. Just super, super cool people. And you know, it's kind of neat because I've spent my whole life, you know, studying Moog synthesizers and, you know, being an enthusiast. And then now since I've got to meet some of these people, it's just awesome to put a face with the name and actually put a characteristic of a person with the name. So it's just really cool. And I'm really honored to and feel very blessed I got to meet some of these people. So now we got the interface loose from the interface boards. You can see the boards are actually still setting loose. So we'll go ahead and unplug the connectors for the interface. And this is really where you want this bubble wrap on the keys. And let's see here, unplug this guy. Got all that. We're going to need some wire cutters because I've got to cut a few harness locations. Oh no, it's already broke, so we're good. We actually need to take this ground wire off though. That wire there out of the way. Put the screw back in the back plane here. Not worried about getting it tied or anything, because that's coming out later. So now we should be able to remove this is kind of a job for one-handed person here. Let's see. So that connector plugged in. One propped up there. There we go. Alright, so there's our interface removed. So that's actually our slider panel, and you can see in the back how those kind of mount. They mount actually to a brass or to a plate. I don't know if it's brass or not. I'm not sure of the material. I think it's aluminum. And then the sliders bolt to that, and then between that panel and the interface is this foam, which turns to grease. And so what I do, I remove all these sliders, pull all these slider banks out, clean between the panel real good so you don't get all that crap back in your sliders. I flush and lube the sliders and replace them if necessary. Usually, it's really rare I ever have to replace a slider unless it's just been really broke or something. These sliders held up pretty well. So I'm going to set this interface panel just over here to the side. It'll stay up on its own here. Alright, so that's out of the way. So now you can actually see the interface boards with all the LEDs and And actually for this, for right now, I'm going to leave the harness attached. So I'm not real worried about removing these just yet. That will happen at a later time. So I like to keep the harness on for debugging purposes. Because if there's any logic faults, I can actually trace it down and look at the wire pin out. It helps things out a lot. But I will take my camera with the tripod and just I'll walk you through these boards right quick. Just to give you a better idea here what we're looking at. So anyways, this is your what we refer to as the left-hand control board. Our left control board, I think LCB, I think it's called in the manual. Left control board. These are all your actual switching circuits here that associates with your variation and preset modes, and those are real common to fail. That's one of the things I replace in the restoration is all those chips. So it'll have a whole new set once once I'm done here. Same thing on this board. This is all your binary logic stuff here. You got your decoders and stuff like that for when you push a preset button. It does all the lows and highs to send you the right information on the LED screen. It's not LCD, it's LED. Your digits. And so yeah, that's pretty much these boards. I replace all the LEDs and clean all the buttons, and I give it the works. But you can kind of see now the inside of the Polymoog. This is actually the brace here for your legs when you screw in the center braces. That's what you're screwing into. So anyways, let me put the camera back on the tripod here and we'll finish up. Actually, I got a big old box here behind me. I'm going to put these interface boards in. So we'll do it like this right here. So I'm just going to take the harness and pull the harness up. And actually, as a trick I do with these, I actually flip them up like this right here. Just make sure your harness is in good shape if you do this, because some harnesses I've actually had are dry rotted, and I've actually had to rewire some of the stuff. So what we're going to do, we're just going to take it and I'm just going to set all this. Oh, that's right, I forgot to cut this zip tie right here. So let me cut the zip tie off. I got to separate the keyboard contacts from the harness. Right here. So we're just going to cut these zip ties. You'll be getting new ones on it when I restore. Alright, so I should separate the yeah, that's got it separated. Yeah, this gray wire here is actually coming from your key contacts to your dynamic circuit and all that. So now then, we'll take these boards here with me still strapped up here. You can kind of see it's what it looks like as a bundle of the harness and boards. I'm going to set it in a box over here, and we'll work on those at a later time. So now we can actually pull this off. Oops. And actually we don't even need an ESD strap anymore, because now we got all the major circuits out of the way that are static sensitive. So we can now work without an ESD strap, and we can unplug power. So we got power unplugged. So we don't have to worry about sticking our hand in 120 volts there as well. So these are interface screws. We'll start our interface screw bag again. All these screws here out of the way. And basically what I'm doing, guys, I'm stripping this thing down so I can take this main chassis home with me and give it a bath. And because this may not show up on camera, but it's got a lot of dust and dirt in it, a lot of grime. And so I'm going to be taking it apart, as well as rebuilding this keyboard. This keyboard definitely needs new key bushings. You can hear just how noisy it is. So I'll be getting a restore as well. And this Polymoog here is actually missing quite a few screws, just because I think Dave used it for parts. Probably what happened, I'm guessing either some parts were taken to work on, maybe he was prototyping something else and stole the transformer. I actually put a transformer in this one and everything. I had a spare transformer, and so I redid all this backplane already. It was missing the fuse block, it was missing the switches, it was missing the transformer, it was missing the power supply, and the back plane's only held in with a few screws. So what I'm guessing is he probably used this Polymoog here because it was actually the most. Sorry about that, my camera timed out. But yeah, anyways, I think Dave used this one for parts because what happened is, I didn't know this, but he didn't have any of the parts to repair these things. Even though he designed them, when he left Moog, there's nothing left. So he didn't have like the divider chips, he didn't have all these parts to keep these things serviced. And which is kind of sad. I really wish I would have known that. I tried to contact Dave a few times back in the day before he passed, and yeah, I never did really get in contact. And I figured maybe he had just kind of left Moog, in the past, which I don't blame him. And so I never really did try to get back in touch with him after that. But it was kind of a sad thing to know he couldn't fix his own design because he didn't have the chips. He didn't have all these special parts. And so my guess, he had 3 of these Polymoogs, so he probably used this one to fix the other one. And then probably just as things would die, because of age, it just they all became giant paperweights pretty much. But now we're resurrecting these things. We're going to make them great. Because luckily I have actually, great thing is I actually have some of the stock for these things from the original Moog plant, so it's kind of handy having the stock needed to keep these things fixed. I don't have everything to say the least, but I have some spare Polycom chips and things like that, so I can actually rebuild the mod cards that die. And which is really handy. Alright, so I think that's all the screws. Yeah, that's it. So now, there's the back plane. So that's got your everything on the back of it. You can see that grease inside there where the power supply's set. And that's your transformer and your wiring harness. What's nice is this is a really nice transformer they use. It's got 3 independent secondaries for each of the voltage rails, so you're not stressing out one winding trying to run all the power. So since it's got 3 secondaries separate, it actually saves the transformer a lot of stress. So pretty nice design there. But yeah, you kind of see that plug I was talking about too. Let me get. That's actually your harness plug that connects all your jacks on the back, so you can actually just unplug this thing rather than having to desolder all that crap like I've had to do on some of the other synthesizers. Japanese synths are the worst for soldering things directly, and that's a pain in the rear end. So we got that. Let me got a bag for labels for these screws. As you can see, we're getting it down to a bare chassis now. We got this. That's the rear plane screws. We're done with that. We'll throw it in the box here with the boards. Now we got 1 keyboard screws and chassis screws. I just put those all in one bag. We're going to remove our brace support. I wouldn't necessarily have to remove this if I didn't want to, but the reason I go in and remove it before I give this thing a wash is because I don't want water getting in the screws and rusting these screws out. So, this makes things a lot nicer when you put it back together. You don't have to worry about rust or any of that kind of stuff because of something that you didn't remove. That would have took, just an extra couple of minutes to remove. So, just do it right the first time and you don't have to worry about it ever again. And if you do have to worry about it again, you don't have to worry about rusty screws. So. The thing is, I have several projects going on, so what I'm going to do is strip this down, and I'm going to jump back on some memory moogs. And I've got another memory moog in, luckily, so I'm going to kind of take some readings and hopefully figure out what's going on with the memory moog I've had for the last couple of months. Because really, I've only had one unit in here for the last couple of months. Sometimes it helps to have an extra unit, you know, it really does, because I can look at manuals, I can look at schematics, you know, but sometimes you just got to really look at a signal path to see what they're doing. It just sometimes makes a world of sense when you look at something and you go, oh, okay, you know, that's how it's supposed to be working. So there's our brace support, and you can actually see, this is actually what you see from underside the Polymoog, is that head there, and that's for where you screw those knobs in to hold your braces. So that's out of there. So we actually just throw that over here in the box and get this bubble wrap out of the way. All right, now we're going to remove our supports for these sides here. These are actually what the legs screw into these braces here. And I found out the hard way, you never really want to work on taking one of these apart with the legs on it. I did that one time, and when you start loosening like the interface and stuff, things can actually start kind of warping because it loses some of its strength. So I just always, after that, I use it on the table. It don't break anything, but it just causes you to misalign screws and stuff, especially when putting it back together. And so it's easier just to do it with it flat on the table. And when I put all this back together, I have to do an alignment process. There's an actual alignment. So you can actually get these out of alignment and cause interface to be offset and all that kind of stuff. So. And there's been times I've actually had to bend these things into shape because of, especially a Polymoog that's taking a hard fall or something. We're going to put these screws here. I know all these are chassis screws. I can pretty much pinpoint where they go now just from memory. So yeah, here's one of our braces for our interface right here. Bolts right here to this. That's out of there. This comes out of there. This is this plate, and then here's the threaded aluminum plates for the legs. So you actually have those little rubber feet that screw into here that hold that. The brace on that screw your legs into. So that's out of there on this one side. Put that in the box. Same thing over here. Actually, there's our ground wire, one of our ground wires. That actually connects that shield I showed you earlier. That goes between the shield and this plate. It actually bolts through your interface screw. So when I remove that interface screw, I'll loosen that thing. Oops, not that one. I know where it went though, so I'll get it in a minute. That is one complaint I have about this shop I've got, is that the floor is, it's got that garage floor coating on it that prevents moisture from seeping. And it's a color, and you drop something on it like a spring or anything, like for a key contact, it's almost impossible to find it. Let me go over here and get this screw. Luckily these are pretty big screws. But I've actually dropped some screws and I spent the whole day looking for one screw. It was a special, a special thread pattern or something, Usually if it's something that's pretty common, I'll just run to Lowe's or Home Depot and pick up a new screw, and I'll install a brand new set of screws in it. But sometimes it always seems to be that one rare screw that you always need that you cannot find, and you spend an hour, hour or two looking for it on the floor, and finally, I got a little speaker magnet I'll run across the floor sometimes, and I can find things. The same thing over here. I got the braces, got these out of here. So all that's out. Throw that in the box. And those are directional. They'll only work one way, but you'll know it once you put it back together, which way they go. So now we're going to remove the keyboard. So this is the fun part. So what we're going to do here, and there's a trick to this that I found that works really, really well, because the keyboard is most of the way the Polymoog. I mean, it's a heavy, heavy keyboard. It's actually the same keyboard as used in the the Mini Moog, but it's really long and it's got weights. It's actually a semi-weighted keyboard. So it's got a lot more weight to it than what the Mini Moog keyboard has. So what I do, and this is going to be kind of funny, I know, but I take all my meters and I take all my drill, and I put it as far to the back as I can here. I take my toolbox here, put it back here, and alright, we'll throw my thermal cam in there too. Thermal cam. And we'll put this decade resistor box I use for troubleshooting some stuff. Now we should be able to pull this thing over without it falling off the table. Yeah, if I didn't have all this stuff on it, what happened is this thing would just tilt forward like that. But I've got enough weight on the back of it where I can balance it out. So it's well balanced. And then what I have to do is I have to get under this thing, like this right here, and I have to remove the keyboard screws. And actually we got to go a little farther off the table, see if it's going to hold it. Yeah, so we're good. Sometimes I'll use a drill to remove these screws, but for this video I figure I'll just do it by hand. But never, one rule guys, is never tighten anything with a drill on these Polymoogs. That's my pet peeve for anybody out there, is never tighten anything with a drill, especially one that doesn't have a torque setting. I've seen so many times where people, especially like on Mini Moogs and stuff, because it's a wood chassis, they'll run the screws in on the bottom plate with a drill, and it actually eats the wood out of the hole, so you lose your threads. And when you lose your threads, you just can't keep the screw in it anymore. So. Alright, just about there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 screws in total for the front of the keyboard, and then there's 3 in the back. Once I get this keyboard out, I'll flip it over and show you the underside of one of these complete. I know I've made videos on the Pratt Reed keyboard. I'll just do a refresher here on this video. Because there's a whole other side to these Polymoog restorations. It's really a pain in the rear end. and that's doing a key alignment. The screw here's been rounded off. There we go. And because these things are so big, you got like 71 notes. They're definitely time-consuming rebuilds. Alright, so we got the keyboard out. So I got the bag of screws here. And once again, you'll definitely know the difference between keyboard screws and chassis screws. They're all different. Alright, so now I'm just going to pull these screws in the box. Now we can take all of our stuff off here. That's a trick of the trade right there. And I usually remove the keyboard screws prior to taking everything apart, but in this case I actually kind of forgot. So that's one of the methods I found that works really well when doing that. So now we got the loose keyboard. We can take the keyboard out now. So actually I'm going to set the keyboard here in the floor temporarily. Alright, now I'll show you what this thing looks like, just nasty. This is a good reason I clean them. And you'll see why. There's a lot of discoloration, especially here where the keys were. You can see how all the trash gets in there. Now these will actually come out as well. These are your contact covers, which unscrew from the bottom. You can see there they got screws and plates, which is actually really nice. You can remove those covers and access the key contacts. But that's the raw chassis of the Polymoog now. So you've really seen this thing go from a full Polymoog to a full teardown. And I'm going to move this off the table now. Flip that back over and see what I'm doing. There we go. So I'm going to move this off the table. I'm not going to flip it over because it's really nasty. I'll give it a vacuum before I take it home. Set it over here on the floor. Set this over here. Alright. So I'm going to set the keyboard back on the table. And then I'll show you some things about the Polymoog keyboard that's different from any other keyboard. One being this right here is because there's so much weight with these keys, and because they got the weights, you could actually knock these things out of alignment easier. So what they did, they put this wood bar inside of it. When I've actually had them in and they missed these things. Some of the early ones didn't have this. This was a later add-on, but it's just a wood bar with felt. So that comes out. We'll lay that over here. And then what we're going to do, we're going to flip it upside down. They don't make keyboards like this, and there is no modern keyboard that really has the good feel of these as these keyboards did. Put it upside down here. That's really where most of your weight is. Like I say, it's pretty heavy. So I'm just going to show you the underneath here. Show you how these things actually work. This one's actually got a lot of tarnishing, I've noticed, because I hadn't actually looked at this contact board yet. So what I'll do is I'll polish these bus rails. But basically these are your hammers. You can see how that works. It's a hammer action keyboard, which means that you got the key goes up and down. It's actually got like a little lobe in here, kind of like a cam. It pushes on that hammer and pulls it forward. It's a forward motion. Your contact is actually made up of springs on this, connected to a circuit board. This circuit board here, which has tracings on it, and you can kind of see how that works. So the front contact here is actually for your mono keyboard circuit. You can see the resistor network there for your 1 volt per octave. And then the back contact right here is actually for your key triggering and dynamics. That's how that works. So that's the underside of the keyboard, and you can kind of see just how massive. I gotta go through each one of these contacts and clean it, and once I pull the keys off and replace the key bushings, I have to do a full alignment, get everything in order here. But you can see the weights that are that's glued into the keys. Same thing for the brown ones, but they're up underneath. You can't see the weights. But all notes have those, and got some weight to it. And you can see a little rust down here. I've just noticed. It's right down in the corner. I'll clean that up real good. And then these spacers are used. They're actually spacers here that set the keyboard height in the Polymoog chassis. That changes between units as well. So it looks like this actually might have been, can't tell if that's a 79 or not there. Sometimes you like to see a date on the print read keyboard. But anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed this teardown. The Polymoog now sets as empty chassis. Got the circuit boards over there, and you got the box of all the boards there. So anyways guys, I thought you might enjoy this video, something a little different here. And thanks for watching guys. Take care.